Today we'll be recapping the 2011 thriller movie titled Limitless. Set in New York City, the story follows the life of a writer named Eddie Mora. He recently bagged a book contract and even got paid in advance. Unfortunately, he hasn't been able to even start the new book. As his lingering writer's block weighs him down, the only person to encourage him is his caring girlfriend, Lindy, who's been very supportive during the difficult period of his career. However, even her support isn't enough to ignite the spark he needs to write the book. The depression eventually kicks in, and Eddie ends up spending his afternoons either drinking to stupor at bars or wasting away in his messy apartment. Soon, Lindy can no longer deal with his behavior and decides to end the relationship because she doesn't think he's ready to get his life back in order. She tells him that she can't babysit him anymore, especially now that her career is about to take off. Eddie confesses his love to her, telling her that he wants to be with her, but his words aren't enough to change her mind, so she leaves him for good. On his way home, Eddie is approached by a young man named Vernon. It turns out that Eddie had a short marriage with his girlfriend from college named Melissa. He remembers that Vernon used to be a drug dealer, but Vernon tells him that he's done with that life. Vernon invites Eddie to a bar for drinks and asks him how he's been. He tells Eddie that Melissa has remarried and now has 2 kids with her new husband. Eddie, on the other hand, tells Vernon that he's still single and is currently having a hard time writing a new book. Hearing his sob story, Vernon tells Eddie that he has something to help him with his creative problems. He reaches into his pocket and brings out a small pill. Seeing this, Eddie immediately accuses him of still pushing drugs, but Vernon claims that the drug is legal. He tells him that the drug has passed all regulatory tests and would be sold to the public the following year. He claims to have early access to the drug called NZT because he works for the pharmaceutical company. Eddie doesn't believe his story, but he's interested in the drug. Vernon tells Eddie that the drug helps stimulate receptors in the brain, allowing the users to use 100% of their brain. Their little chat is interrupted when Vernon receives a call. It appears that the matter is urgent, so he gives Eddie his card and asks to meet some other time. Eddie rejects the pill, but Vernon insists that he take it because a tablet costs $800. Afterward, Eddie walks home and thinks about how miserable his life has become. Feeling like he's already at his lowest, he swallows the pill even though he still doesn't believe it would do him much good. When he gets home, his landlord's wife berates him because he still hasn't paid his rent. While she's still throwing insults at him, Eddie zones out and the effects of the NZT kick in. He suddenly spots a book about the law in her bag and immediately presumes that something else made her upset. Out of nowhere, Eddie asks her about law school, and she's shocked that he even knows about it. Mysteriously, he suddenly remembers coming across a book about law years ago in college, and even more surprisingly, he remembers everything he read in it. He then recommends a better book for her assignment and gives her other tips to help her do well in it. The lady is immediately impressed by his knowledge and even gets aroused by it. She invites him into the house where he helps her with the assignment before they have intercourse. Afterward, Eddie returns to his apartment and is baffled by how he suddenly knows so much about the law. Eddie soon realizes that what the drug has done is that it has taken every piece of information he's ever been exposed to and turned it into an organized group of files stored in his brain and made accessible to him at any given time. Eddie proceeds to clean up his messy apartment, and then he begins writing his book. The writer's block is gone, and after a short time, he's written a 90-page manuscript. It appears that the pill didn't just give him insanely retentive memory, but also boosted his brain activities to keep him creative and motivated. The following day, Eddie wakes up feeling like the effects of the pill have worn off. Later, he takes the manuscript to his editor, and although she doesn't expect much from him, she agrees to read it anyway. When he gets home, she calls him and praises his work. This makes Eddie even more anxious because he now depends on the drug to continue the book. He decides to visit Vernon so he can get more NZT. Eddie reaches Vernon's apartment. He finds Vernon with bruises on his face. He asks for more NZT, and Vernon tells him he lied about it being legal. Eddie doesn't care about that, just asks for more. He tells Eddie to do some chores for him first, and he agrees. But when he returns to the apartment, he sees the place has been turned upside down, and Vernon has been shot dead. Before calling the cops, he searches Vernon's house for his NZT, which he finds along with some cash. Afterward, the police arrive, and Eddie is interrogated at the station. They let him go and tell him that they'll be in touch. Getting home, Eddie takes another pill and uses the enhancement to continue his book. Over the next 4 days, Eddie cleans up very nicely, finishes his book, learns how to play the piano, and even discovers that he can learn any language by listening to it. Now that things are looking up for Eddie, he's become more confident and can mingle with any class of people thanks to his vast knowledge about every topic. He decides that he's not going to waste the second chance he got and decides to delve into stock trading. Eddie meets a broker named Kevin who welcomes him into the world of trading. He begins reading books on trading, and with the new knowledge, he grows the $800 left of Vernon's money to $2,000 in a day. The next day, he's shocked to see that the money has moved up to $7,000. He concludes that he needs even more capital to make more bank as quickly as possible, so he meets a loan shark named Gennady to help him with the funds. Gennady gives him the loan, asking him to pay it back on time or else something bad would happen to him. Eddie confidently accepts the terms and begins trading with the loan. After just 2 weeks, Eddie makes $2 million on his brokerage account, and this catches the attention of a Wall Street tycoon. One evening, Eddie has dinner with Lindy and tells her all about his progress in the past month. She's impressed that he's cleaned up his act, and after dinner, the two get back to her place and make love. Over the next few days, Lindy and Eddie rekindle the flames of their love, and she tells him she wants to be with him. As the two kiss, Eddie notices a man spying on them. At night, something strange happens to Eddie. He mysteriously teleports from his hotel room to the hallway but can't remember how or when it happened. Soon, he and Kevin meet with the Wall Street tycoon named Carl Van Loon. Eddie impresses Carl with his vast knowledge and impresses him further when he deduces that he's planning a massive merger by just looking at some information about his companies. Carl then offers Eddie the chance to help in restructuring the business deals, and he agrees. After stepping out of Carl's car, he decides to walk around the city so he can soak in even more information like a sponge. However, he soon starts to experience strange episodes, losing consciousness and finding himself in different parts of the city with no memory of how he got there. He then ends up at a party and hooks up with a model afterward before blanking out again. After defending himself against some things, Eddie blanks out again and finds himself on top of the Brooklyn Bridge, not knowing how he got there. Eventually, he heads home and decides not to take any more NZT because it's taking a toll on his health. He goes to the merger meeting with Carl but can't understand anything. Suddenly, he sees a news report of a woman who was found dead in a hotel room, and he realizes it's the model he was with the previous night. He immediately runs out of the room and begins to vomit, fearing that he might have killed her. Later, Melissa calls him asking about Vernon, so he asks to meet up with her somewhere. At a park, he calls all of Vernon's clients and is horrified to find out that they're all dead. There, he's finally confronted by the man who's been spying on him. He begins walking away, but the man follows, so he runs and finally evades him. Eddie then meets Melissa at a restaurant, and she reveals that she knows about NZT. She tells him that she was once a user of the drug, but stopped it when it took a toll on her health. Unfortunately, she was already too dependent on it that even after 2 years, she hasn't gotten her life back together. Afterward, he gets attacked by Gennady, asking for his money. When Eddie falls, the pill slips out of his pocket and Gennady takes it. Eddie pays Gennady back his money and goes to Lindy's office. He collapses there and tells her everything, asking her to help him retrieve the pills from his apartment. After getting the pills, she notices that she's being followed by the man who was spying on Eddie. She calls Eddie, and he tells her to take one of the pills to help her escape. Later, Gennady keeps asking Eddie for NZT, so he hires 2 bodyguards and continues taking the pill so he can keep working for Carl. He plans to keep working so he can complete the merger with Atwood Company. Soon, he discovers a way to take the NZT and still live a healthy life. He also asks a chemist to help him find an antidote for the effects of the pills. Everything seems to be going fine until he becomes a prime suspect in the model's death. He hires one of the best lawyers in New York to handle the case, but Gennady continues to blackmail him with the model's death for more NZT. On the merger signing day, Atwood falls into a coma, and Eddie realizes that he's using NZT too. Later, Eddie's lawyer steals his pills and he goes into withdrawal. A while later, he receives a package containing the severed hands of his bodyguards, and he realizes that Gennady is coming for him. He runs home and locks himself inside his house, but Gennady breaks in asking for more NZT. He injects himself with NZT to make it last longer, but Eddie stabs him with a knife and consumes his blood to use the powers of the drug to kill Gennady's men. Afterward, he meets the man who's been spying on him and discovers that Atwood hired him to get more NZT. After Atwood dies, they two retrieve the pills from the lawyer's apartment. 1 year later, we see that Eddie retained his wealth and is now a prominent political figure. Carl visits him and reveals that he has taken over the company that makes NZT. He offers Eddie an unlimited supply of the drug if he backs him politically. The story ends with a surprising twist, as Eddie tells Carl that he already perfected the drug and found a way to retain the special abilities without using it.